Welcome, everybody. We expect a few more folks to come on board, but at this time, Pastor Karen, I'll invite you to share a little bit about why we're gathered today, and then we'll have a ministry commercial, if you will, in lifting up in Spiritus and the work they do.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Pastor Karen Boda, and I'm one of the assistants to the bishop for congregational life in the Southeastern Synod. And that means I work primarily with a combination of mobility, so that would be pastors as well as congregations in transition, but also with stewardship. And it's an absolute delight to welcome Pastor Mike Ward with us today. I'll do a full introduction of him in just a couple of minutes. But as you are signing in, if you've not had an opportunity already, go ahead and put your name and your congregation and your city into the chat box. And that way we'll know a little bit about you and where you're coming from. As we progress today too, feel free to use that chat box for any questions or comments or anything that you need. If you do need tech support, that's going to go through Pastor Michael, and he is labeled tech support. So there's your clue for that one. And we're going to go ahead and start today. Each of these sessions, we have had a little bit of an introduction from one of our ministry partners. And today we'll have an introduction from Spiritus.
It's all like a family. It's like a big family that's coming out to help. And I am so happy that they chose us to be a part of their working experience. God for each and every one of them for wanting to be in this organization to help, because there's a lot of us out there that needs help, and we don't know which way to turn. And so if someone recommends Us to you, have no worry, be self-assured that you've got the best team, and you can't find a better team than Us. And Experience has been wonderful. They came in because we didn't know which way to turn. And they have really been wonderful. They have cleaned up and just came in and just took over and just made everything feel good for us. And it was just awesome. I had those concerns like, what are we gonna do? Because we don't have any insurance and we have health issues. And so when we heard that Us was coming in, it was like a blessing to us. And then to see them work when they got here, it just put everything to the side for a session to come out and that quick get help, because I never expected for the help to come that quick. And for them to assess and come out and say they were coming out the next day, it's like, wow. And it just felt so good, because dealing with the mold issue and what we had to go through on the inside, and for them to come in and just quickly clean up and not even hesitate, that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. They were amazing, amazing. All quietly, did everything good, and we had a good rapport, and my husband fed them, and they sat here and ate, and it was all good, and we were just appreciative of one another, and we shared experiences where everyone had came from. And so it was just a good experience. It was just a good experience. And I'm glad that Us was led to come to us and to make everything better for us. You don't have to worry, because Us is just like a family. They come in quietly, they don't invade your privacy, they are very respectable, and they get the job done. They took care of the roof, they took care of the inside, they took care of everything. It was just like it was family coming in, helping family, and it was just tremendous. They kept their word, they kept their promise, and they wanted to go beyond, and they did everything that they could. And I am so grateful, my family is so grateful to what they have done.
We certainly give God thanks for Spiritus and the work that they have done, especially in the disaster ministry within the Synod. Just unbelievable work. So we give God thanks, and we are thankful that we can partner with them as well. Now we're going to go ahead and switch gears, and I'm going to introduce to you Reverend Mike Ward. Some of you today on the call may have known him or may know him now from his work with us in our synod on a class called Beginning a Culture of Generosity. And this is a program in which he is guiding 21 of our congregations through a stewardship program this year. Previously, Pastor Mike served for 12 years as the Vice President of Advancement at Novus Way Ministries. These are our Luther Ridge Rock Ranch and Springs Camp Ministries. And here he led capital campaigns that raised over $13 million for the camps, in addition to the annual fund and the pledged giving work. Pastor Mike is now a partner with GSB, where he works with camps, church institutions, and congregations in fundraising, strategic planning, and board development. He served on the boards of the ELCA Youth Ministry Network and most recently the ELCA Church Council. His first book, which is called Abundance, Creating a Culture of Generosity, was published by Fortress Press in 2020. And if you've not had the opportunity to read it, I would highly recommend it. Pastor Mike has a passion for helping to teach congregations and other nonprofits how to tell stories of impact. And Pastor Mike also leads the program Stewardship for All Seasons, which he calls SAS or SAS, if you hear him mention that. And this is for converting congregational culture from one of scarcity to one of recognizing God's abundance. Pastor Mike grew up in the Southeastern Synod, actually at my home congregation in Marietta, Georgia, and he now lives with his family in North Carolina. And we welcome him to lead us in this session called With Glad and Generous Hearts, a look at stewardship of self, congregation, and church. So welcome, Pastor Mike.
Thank you, Pastor Karen. And it's a delight to be with you today. This is certainly my favorite topic, so I'm glad I get to be with you on it today. I do hope that we will have some time for interaction. We do have several poll questions to kind of get your opinion as we go through this. And please, 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 if I say something that just doesn't make sense, put a question in the chat box. Pastor Karen will interrupt me as need be. And we can get into some dialogue and conversation too as we need to. So please, let's have the interaction we can. I know it's a hard medium sometime for that, but if you put your questions in as they come up, or if there's just something that I say that doesn't make sense, we can have that conversation in the chat box. I'm going to do a little bit of screen sharing, but I'm going to also switch back because I do enjoy seeing that people are still paying attention. And so I'll kind of go back and forth on that. And let me get to that here. So I'll be sharing screen for a little while. There we go. I wanted to make sure I could at least see a couple of you while I did that. So there's the title slide. The website address is directly to our blog, where we have different blogs on different stewardship topics. I will post that in the chat box here in a few moments as well. But as we get started, I want to start with a couple of Bible verses. And I'm not going to read all this to you. Everything I use is going to be familiar to you. But I want to start with the feeding of the 5,000. And if I have a book out called Abundance, you can probably be rest assured that this story would be included there. Matthew 14, it is probably the story in the Bible that maybe for me is the most clear articulation of abundance. Jesus was trying to get away from folks, but they found him, and he ends up teaching them all day. The disciples suggest maybe we should send them away so they can take care of themselves. But Jesus had compassion on them. He said, no, you feed them. You kind of have to imagine them with a whiny voice, but we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish, right? But then after giving thanks, we read that all ate and were satisfied, and there were leftovers. A couple of parts of that not sure why I muted myself. Some of the things that I really like to focus on is that they ate and were satisfied. Satisfied is just one of those things in our culture that I think we've maybe lost sense of, that it seems like we have to try to accumulate as much as we can, or there's never enough. And I just love that word about eating and being satisfied. I was on, as you heard, on staff at Novus Way for a dozen years, and Pastor Mary Caniff-Kuhn was there. And I remember even in the dining hall, she encouraged people, you don't have to eat until you're full. You can eat until you're satisfied. And just that difference in stuffing ourselves versus, until we're satisfied. I also just love that, the initial reaction of the disciples is, we can't do it, we've got to send them away. And Jesus's response is, you know what, take a look around you. There's plenty already there. And we just have to look for it and learn how to use it right. And there's not only enough, there's even left over. All right. Living in a political season, we're constantly reminded we don't have enough and life isn't good enough and it will always be better, right? Well, I think we can be called to live a little counterculturally and say, you know what? Maybe things can be better, but at the same time, we are surrounded by a God who loves us, that provides us not only enough, but enough to share, and that love and abundance. So anytime you're feeling like you're in a world of scarcity, the feeding of the 5,000 is a great place to spend a little bit of time. Next that I'd like to share is, I used to love the old t-shirts that were out that said "Fear not" on them. And I'm not sure they were quoting scripture, but I always thought of scripture when I saw them. And the reason I go to, I love Matthew chapter 6. In fact, of everything in the Bible, it might be my favorite chapter of all. I'm going to quote a different section of it here in just a few minutes. But, Matthew 6, 25 to 34, it's, don't worry about your life, what you will eat. Look at the birds of the air. But then can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? As I engage this world, I hear stories of a lot of people who are worried about tomorrow. In fact, I think fear is one of the number one, I'm not going to say it that way. I think fear is the number one thing holding the Protestant church in America back. That we worry. I interact with people a lot about financial stuff. I'm the stewardship guy. And I hear a lot of people worried about whether or not they're going to have enough money for tomorrow. I hear a lot of people worried about outliving their savings. I hear a lot of people that are worried about money in one way or another. And I hear this across socioeconomic classes. It's a different worry in each class, but it's worry nonetheless. And there have been sociological studies about this, that no matter what we have, we want 20% more in order to feel secure. It doesn't matter which economic class you're in, but everybody says that if we just had 20% more, then we wouldn't have to fear anymore. The reality is, once you get 20% more, then you just want the next 20%, and you still worry about where you are today. Matthew 6, 34 ends, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has worries about itself." I forgot to tell you the story that related to the feeding of the 5,000. I'll come back to that one. But the story of generosity about fear, it was late April this year, and this is in Detroit. And a pastor got a phone call, and the parishioner said, "Hey, can you meet me in the parking lot in about 15 minutes? I need to give you something." The pastor said, "Sure, I'll meet you in the parking lot in 15 minutes." And so pastor walks out in the parking lot, and member drives up, and he says, "Pastor, I have a check for you." And the check includes, the check is for $6,000. It includes the $3,000 I should have given last year, but I didn't because I was afraid of my finances. And it includes the $3,000 that I really need to give this year. And I'm going to quit living in fear, because as I'm seeing this pandemic, I realize that I'm doing better than most, and I need to share. But I'm so, and went on to apologize for living in fear the year before. I've been moved by that story, just because I know many of us worry about life. And the problem is when material possessions become too important to us, we can get bogged down by that fear. And if we talk about how do we live a free life as a Christian, part of it is to get through letting our possessions kind of control us. I had a story I want to tell you about abundance, and so I'm going to back up a slide. I'll come off of share screen for this one. I hope y'all don't get dizzy with me bouncing back and forth like that. But so again, this was April. Pandemic just began. My congregation has co-sponsored a food pantry with our Episcopal neighbors for years. And we got one of those World Hunger Grants. And I'm going to forget some of the details of what the grant was, but we had to raise twice as much as what the grant would be, and then the grant would fund, right? And so we got this really cute email on a Thursday morning. And the email said, good news, the ELCA World Hunger has provided us a grant. If we are able to add this to it, they will kick in, their match. And we just need to do this within the next several weeks. 52 minutes later, we had exceeded the match. 52 minutes. It took whatever the goal, I've lost the numbers, but whatever the goal was that we thought, looked kind of big, or at least the people that wrote the email and got the grant thought looked kind of big. Our congregation satisfied that in 52 minutes. By the end of the day, we had just shattered it and had raised all kinds of money. And what it was, we saw our neighbors in need. We recognized we had enough, and as our neighbors had need for food, that we had enough to share. So that's kind of my story for living out there, that abundance mentality. All right. So what is abundance? I saw, if y'all pay attention to your Facebook page, you saw this quoted earlier this week. Appreciated it. I believe that abundance is recognizing the one who provides us everything, and recognizing that it's not only enough, but it's enough to share. And I think we can all do that regardless of where we live. John 10:10, Jesus' famous words, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And I don't think we have abundant life as long as we live in fear of tomorrow. And I don't think we have that abundant life until we recognize that we have enough, and we have enough to share. And I was taught this lesson as a VP of advancement. Working for Novus Way as I did, I got to meet some of the most generous people that could teach me all kinds of lessons. And I don't have enough time today to teach you all of them. But there was a man, a widower, lived in near Charleston, South Carolina. And he lived in the same home for over 55 years. And I think he probably could have afforded a bigger one, but he lived right off, for those of you familiar with the area, right off Highway 17. I feared for my life every time I pulled out of his driveway. I don't know what the car count was, but it felt like it was a couple million cars an hour, okay? And he ended up with cancer, still very vibrant, had his faculties all about him, but couldn't go to church anymore just because he couldn't be around the germs. And he called me one day. We had gotten to know each other really well. I even took him communion when I was visiting, just because I didn't do that for a lot of my donors, but he was one that he requested it, and so I did. And I was in regular communication with his pastor as well. I wasn't trying to do anything his pastor wasn't doing or anything like that. But he called me one day and he said, Mike, I got your newsletter for the camps. And I was like, oh, great. Send that out quarterly. Glad you got it. He said, I saw your needs list. And I said, I don't remember what I said, but probably something like, well, yeah, we put that out there just in case there's something somebody wants to get for us. He said, Mike, I can do it. So what do you mean you can do it? He said, well, I've looked through the list and I think I can get you everything you need. He said, would it be okay if the van was used instead of new? I was like, oh my word, we're at camp. We're delighted if anything still works when we get it. Sure, the van can be used and not new. It'll be an improvement. I said, trust me, it'll be an improvement over what we're currently using. And he said, well, give me a couple of weeks and I'll call you. I'm going to drive it up, have a friend of mine follow me, and then, but I'd like to see you. So I want to pick a day when you're going to be there. So ultimately we picked a day and he came up. And I went up to meet him as he was coming in. and the van looked a little bit shinier than I thought it might. And he got out and he said, yeah, the van has 52 on it. I was like, well, it looks better than a van even that would have 52,000 miles on it. The van had 52 miles on it. That's what he considered a used van. And in the back of the van was a generator, and I can't even remember what all else, but the joy on his face to be able to still do that, even as what a parish would call a homebound member, to live that sense of abundance, that he had enough, it was enough to share, and he wanted to make a difference in the lives of the kids and the campers that came up for camp. So just, you know, but prior to that, I would look at a needs list and say, well, maybe I can do something. And he looked at a needs list and said, I can do it. So just, anyway, if you don't like stories, you're not going to like my session today. So I do believe that stewardship is a matter of the heart. Oh, actually, I see it here. The chat box now has a link to our blog. You can actually sign up for our blog and be notified anytime something new is there. If you don't like anything there, just ignore us and pretend we're not there, and you won't miss it then. So I believe ultimately stewardship is a matter of the heart. I think too often in our congregations, we've made stewardship about a financial transaction, all right? But I think stewardship is a matter of the heart, and I think Jesus agrees with me. And I'm gonna try to prove it to you. In Matthew 6:21, back to my favorite chapter of the Bible. In Matthew 6:21, Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I graduated seminary, and I almost graduated seminary thinking that what Jesus actually said was, where your heart is, there your treasure will naturally follow behind, okay? But I was blessed. Mark Allen Powell was my advisor, and he wouldn't let me get out thinking that I was, or being wrong. He was a Matthew scholar. But Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Not the other way around. For years, I really thought it was the other way around, that, you know, whatever you love, that's what you invested more into. And Jesus said, no, what you invest into is what you will love more. And we need to recognize that where our treasure goes, that's where our heart ends up. Now, before I move on with conversation, we need to take a poll. Karen, do you want to do it, or you want me to do it? It doesn't matter to me.
You can do it.
Okay. Let me make sure I use mine and not one of the earlier ones. Here we go.
6.
Here we go. So there should be a poll up on your screen, and you should be able to answer. As a percentage of income, the median Protestant, for those of you that don't remember 4th grade math, the median is the person in the middle if you line us up smallest to largest. So if you're lined up, you know, in ascending or descending order, the person in the middle is known as the median. What percentage of income do you think the person in the middle of that line gives away each year to the church?
Hey, Pastor Mike, I think you might need to click one more button there.
Really?
Either that or I'll do it. Let's see.
It tells me I can share results. I shouldn't have to do that.
You have to do you want me to try it?
Click onto launch poll.
I didn't get that option.
I'll do it.
Okay.
All right. So
There it is. There you go, Karen. And actually,
2 more.
okay. Oh, that's right. We don't get to vote as.
No, you don't get to vote. You're a co-host. 1 more. There we go. Okay.
So, well, you didn't all get it right. So, let's see. So one of you said 10% or more, one said 6 to 9, 3 at 3 to 5. The majority of you said 2%. And actually, I know that. So the majority of you said 2%. 2 of you said 1%. 1 of you said less than 1%. I will tell you that 1 of you is right. And whoever said less than 1% is that person. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. So the reason that the majority answer was 2% is because you've heard before, that's what the average Protestant gives away as percentage of income. Okay. So 2% is the number in our heads for average. I got dumbfounded by the median number when I read about it in a book called Passing the Plate, which is a sociological study of giving. Because the problem, like I know somebody in your synod who gives away 50% of their income. It's a couple, they give 50% of their income away. They skew the average number because they give such a large percentage of their income away. The median Protestant gives to the church 0.62% of their income. Said another way, over half of us give less than 1%. Like that's the easy way. Over half of Protestants give less than 1% of their income away. All right. So if it is true, or the way I like to say it, if Jesus is right, that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, do we have the hearts of the majority of our members? So I think the answer is we don't have enough of them. Okay. I think that we could get more of their hearts, and we do that by getting more of their treasure. And so I think when we look at average attendance trends, like, and I'm not talking about during COVID times, I'm just talking about when we look at, as we look at attendance trends that, you know, I think pre-pandemic, we were excited if people came 1 out of 3 Sundays, sometimes even 1 out of 4 Sundays. Well, they're giving less than 1% of their income. Most of their heart isn't really engaged there necessarily. So I look at stewardship as an opportunity to capture more of people's hearts, that as we work on this and do better, we can get their engagement higher. And I just want to be very, very clear. I don't blame people. Okay. I don't blame anybody for where they are on the generosity journey. We're going to get into all the reasons why I think that we have room to grow here in just a couple of minutes. But I think we've got something to work with. And, you know, the good news, you know, we can go up from here. All right. And even in a pandemic, we can go up from here. I'm seeing tremendous generosity all across the country, even now. Just last week, a congregation I'm working with in a capital campaign secured 2 6-figure gifts. This is a congregation that has never had a 6-figure gift before in its history. There are people willing and excited to invest in ministry when we do this well. And I will say doing this well means that we don't make it about a financial transaction, but we help people to overcome their fears of tomorrow. We help people recognize that we have enough and it's enough to share. We help people to recognize that we have a God of abundance, that abundance has been showered to us, and we can then share that ourselves as well. So, I'm going to get a little bit more into the kind of more practical stuff now a little bit. And again, if you all have questions at any time, I'm not sure there's going to be too many questions on the biblical intro that I just did, but if there are, feel free. But now I'm going to get into a little bit more of the practical side of things. But again, I think the reason that so many of us give so little has to do with fear, has to do with an understanding of God. And then some of it, I think we can change by the ways in which we message, but I'll get to that here in a few minutes. So let me get back to my presentation then. So our current reality, as I just shared, the median Protestant gives away 0.62% of their income to the church. Now, they overall give 0.9%. So, and the reason I say 0.62 is I just don't want anybody thinking I said 6.2%. So that's why I add the 0 in front of it. The largest category of donors in most congregations is those who give less than $5 a week. And in most congregations that I see, it's nearly 50% of the donors. All right. I just looked at some for a congregation earlier today. 2/3 of people gave less than $50 a week. And this was in a zip code where that had nothing to do with wealth. It had everything to do with their intentionality to give. So, and by the way, much of what I'm giving you now, I just realized I did not give credit on the slide itself, comes from that book, Passing the Plate, which is a sociological study of giving. So I do like to give credit where it's due, and that's where this comes from. Theological and biblical understandings of giving are not well developed. I have to tell you that when I talk to even pastors and I say, what's your biblical foundation for giving? It takes a little while to get a good answer. It doesn't just roll off. A lot of times people go to tithing. Well, if the median Protestant gives 0.62% of their income, that's why I don't go to tithing 10% or more. By the way, about 8% of American Protestants tithe. It's not that big of a group, and therefore that's why I don't talk about it hardly at all, because it's relevant to so few. And in many congregations, I almost wrote this as most, but in many congregations, giving is about paying the bills. And if you really want to offend me, if I'm helping you with your stewardship drive, you will say, hey, you did a great job helping us to teach people how to pay the bills, right? Because that is not what I want to be about as we do this. So, and that last statement I just gave you is the reason why I don't blame people who are giving less than 1% of their income. Because if it's only about the congregation paying the bills and not making a difference in the world, why would they necessarily be stimulated to give more money? And so that's part of our challenge. In many congregations, there's no accountability for a lack of giving. And this is because we've misconstrued confidentiality and secrecy. All right, in many congregations, I hear the celebration that only one person, the financial secretary, knows what people give, and they celebrate this idea. First of all, that's against the generally acceptable accounting procedures of the United States, that only one person would know. It opens you up to embezzlement. I'm not telling you I don't trust people, but I've worked around money too long to trust people. And so we don't want just one person to know, but it also takes away any understanding that giving is a spiritual issue. One of the biblical verses I didn't give you was from Paul about the fruits of the Spirit, where generosity is one of them. Why is it acceptable for a pastor to be familiar with everybody's fruit of the Spirit except generosity? So there's no accountability in our congregations, a lack of giving. Somebody who gives $6,000 this year, if they give $20 next year, in most congregations, nobody will ever even ask them about that. And by accountability, I don't mean make somebody feel guilty for not doing it. I mean, find out what in the world is going on in somebody's life that they went from $6,000 a year to $20 a year. Something significant has gone on in their life that has caused this to happen. And it's true on the other side as well. If I go from $20 a year this year to $6,000 next year in my giving, nobody will communicate with me about that to find out what in the world is going on in my life and smile with me and celebrate that something has happened. And so anyway, I can talk more about that, but I'll move on. In a lot of congregations, what we do is we see what money comes in, and then we tell people what we're going to do with it. I've even worse than that, I've heard people announce ahead of time, hey, we're going to hold the budget flat next year, which is code language to your donors saying, we don't have any plans, so don't bother giving us any more money. We need to turn that around. We need to let people know what we feel God calling us to, and then invite people to give to that. And if they do give to it, we can advance the kingdom. If they don't give it to it, then at least they'll know what we want to do. They'll at least know what we sense that God is calling us to. If people don't think we have any vision for the future, they're going to find other places to invest in that are going to help articulate a better future for the kingdom. And then we've lost language for the value of worship, pastoral care, and faith formation in people's lives. I look at the primary core activities of the church being worship, pastoral care, and faith formation in people's lives. And I've actually heard people refer to those as overhead. That, oh, all our money goes to church staff, that's just overhead. Well, what church staff do tends to be worship and pastoral care and faith formation. And if you've ever been the recipient of pastoral care, then you know you don't look at that as overhead. But the problem is we don't have language that talks about that. I'm going to talk about outcome stories in a minute, but we need to be telling outcome stories of the importance of worship in our lives. And you know what? A bunch of us have them because we went very quickly in this church from not having a virtual presence to a virtual presence because our people needed to worship each week. And somehow we need to capture that story. And I think we are. And capture the story of pastoral care. That's not overhead. And I celebrate the heck out of the fact that a church will spend 60% of its revenue on salaries. It means we're doing stuff. That's not overhead. I get a little nervous if we get over 65%, by the way, but 60% of a church budget on salaries means you're investing in the right things, I think. So, but then the other problem is the majority of money, some people say as much as 97% of money stays in the local congregation itself. I don't know what the average mission share is with the Southeastern Synod, but Protestant-wide, about 97% of dollars stay in the local congregation. And the problem with that is it's boring to your donors. It's we know that there are people hungry in our companion synods. We know that there are people wanting faith formation in our companion synods. We know that there are people in our neighborhoods who are struggling. We know that there are people that want to send their kids to camp for faith formation. We know that we just saw the video about people that are victims of natural disaster that we want to help. But 97% of the money is staying to keep the doors open at the local congregation. We need to get bigger and bolder visions of what we can do, and that's how more money will show up. So actually, I'm only supposed to be telling you the current reality, not how to fix it yet. So sometimes we accidentally stifle generosity. You all have seen the box score, as I call it. I think somebody read a box score in a sports page once and said, hey, we should tell people how much revenue we got last month and how far behind budget we are. And that somehow that will cause people to want to give more money away. For now, I'm just going to say that stifles generosity. Don't do it. Telling people just financial numbers without any context of what ministry was accomplished for the kingdom with it. I would be delighted for some ministries to go bankrupt, continuing to try to implement their ministry initiatives week after week after week, because they're making such a huge difference in the community. But simply telling me that they had less money than they needed doesn't tell me anything of what I need to know for them. Like that would only say that I want them to have a balanced budget. I don't really care about balanced budgets. I care about impact in the community, impact on people's lives. And if we do that, I think the money will follow, and we should spend a little less time reporting on it. But we can talk, that statement will often get a question, Karen, so let me know if it does. We also tend to treat everyone the same. We treat a donor giving $200 a week the same as a donor giving $1 a week. And I'm not saying we should treat anybody better than anyone else, okay? We treat people the same. I just got an email this morning from somebody who said, I can't believe that we're asking everybody in this church to grow their giving by 17% this year. We're not. We are not expecting everybody to grow their giving by 17%. We're expecting some people to grow by 3 or 4%. I'm expecting some people their actual dollars given will be less because they're now underemployed or their situation has changed for health or other reasons. but they can be more generous even with where they're at. But then I expect a couple of people to double their giving, because they're currently giving $100 a year, and I think they can give at least $200 next year. And if they think about it, they might be able to give $465. That would simply be growing by $1 a day. And they're in places where I think they can all afford that. And so I'm not expecting, I don't want to treat everybody the same. Don't ever tell people, hey, if y'all would just grow by 17%, we'd be doing great. Because that's terribly unfair to people who are already being really generous according to their means. And it's really unfair to people who haven't really gotten very far on their generosity journey yet. So we shouldn't treat everyone the same. We don't, I gotta say this, and I know we're recording, so I'm gonna say it. We don't treat anybody better than anybody else, but we treat people differently based on where they're at in their generosity journey. So I've already made fun of keeping the budget flat because that's a terrible idea. Costs always go up, and you should reflect that, or at least give people the opportunity to grow their giving. So there's a lot of excuses for people to cut back on their giving. And I've even heard churches give these excuses to people. Places where people are on a fixed income love a good excuse not to increase their giving. They love to say, I'm on a fixed income, I can't grow anymore in my giving. I'm near a lot of people, I'm in the mountains of North Carolina. There's a lot of people that retire here. And so the congregation I was working with nearby had a lot of, well, they have a lot of retirees. And they kept hearing, well, Pastor, I can't grow my giving. I'm on a fixed income. The reality is there's a lot of people in America that are on fixed income in a lot of different circumstances. I was visiting with one of the people on the stewardship committee who I happen to know actually from a national board that I served on. And I said to him, I said, out of curiosity, what's your giving done over the last 6 years? And he said, well, it's gone up significantly. I said, can you track it for me and tell me exactly what it's done? And he said, sure. And he came back and he said, Mike, we've doubled our giving in the last 6 years. I said, and you've been on a fixed income that whole time? I said, yeah. I said, well, how do you do that? Because I heard that once you're on a fixed income, you can't grow anyway. And he said, well, it's because of what we care about. It's what we're investing in. We figured out how to reorient our life in order to continue to grow. And I realize that there are some people in situations where they can't afford to double their giving in 6 years. But there are a lot of people who waste $20 a week in America. I will fully admit, I used to be one of them. I'm not as much one of them as I'm stuck in my house all the time. But I used to be in an airport probably 3 days, if not 4.5 days a week. I easily wasted $20 a week that I just didn't even know where it went. Okay. There are a lot of people, and by the way, I learned this lesson from a high schooler. She taught me how much she was investing per week in fountain drinks at the local convenience store. And she made a gift to a capital campaign I was part of that was bigger than the gift her parents made, because she looked for the money that she was wasting and decided instead she would give that away instead of wasting it. So we shouldn't take people's excuses. There are people who are giving all they can. By the way, the most generous gift I've ever witnessed was from a homeless woman in Milwaukee who heard about the stewardship appeal and what they were trying to do and pledged 50 cents a week. I think that's the largest gift I've ever been part of receiving. And she personally led that congregation to grow their giving by 33% that year because she was willing to see what she had and gift off of that. So the other current realities that we have, we don't talk about money in our country. I tell the story that, I think my parents were generous, but I really didn't know because we never talked about it. I saw the envelope on the steps every week. Like I knew that there was an envelope going to the church, but I honestly couldn't tell you if there was a $1 bill or a $100 bill or a check in there. Like I have no idea. We didn't really talk about that. We don't talk about how it is we learn to be more generous. And one of the reasons why I feel this is so important, I got mentored in my first congregation, well, in the congregation I served in Charlotte, North Carolina. There was a woman there, she's now 101. I think the more generous you are, the less likely to die you are, I think. But that might not be theologically correct, so don't quote me on that one. But she said her husband was I never met her husband, but her husband was a pastor. And she said, we got to our first call and Bob had heard about tithing and we knew we couldn't. There was just no way 10% of our income would be able to go there. We wouldn't have been eating. Like, I mean, and I trust her deeply to not be lying about that. She said, but what we decided to do is to covenant with one another that we would grow our giving by 1% a year and never quit. And when Bob died, they were giving 38% of their income away. I didn't know that was allowed. Like nobody had ever told me before that that was an okay thing to do. Like, because we just didn't talk about giving. Like, we didn't know what was acceptable, what norms were, what the struggle was. Like, I think a whole lot more, you know, I grew up in Marietta, a lot of Baptist influence. So you hear a lot about tithing 10%. By the way, Passing the Plate's a great book. It'll tell you how many of those people are lying about giving 10%. If you actually look at their tax records. But we didn't talk about it. So nobody ever, like, if we just expect people to figure it out, most people are going to figure it out. Well, let me see what's left over at the end of the month and I'll figure out what I can give from that. Well, everybody knows that regardless of what you have, you'll find a way to spend it all, right? That's why, I mean, the Bible talks about first fruits giving, which is probably a good place for many of us to go, because once we give first fruits, then it is that we can align the rest of our spending for that. The other part of the current reality is that many congregations just have too much money in savings. Those of you that got PPP loans and didn't need them, I hope you're giving some money away, or at least investing in some things around your congregation that need investing in. Because if there's too many dollars sitting around a church without a name on them, then people are going to find other places to go with their giving. And I happen to know this is true because it's true of me. My congregation got a PPP loan, and ever since the pandemic started, our revenue has exceeded expenses by about $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Well, I haven't cut my giving back to my congregation, but I've also not increased it. But in the same time, I've tripled my giving to Novus Way because I worry about a future. Well, when I worked with the camps, we didn't really have a business plan for what happened if we didn't have any guests. And so we've tripled our giving to Novus Way because we see the need. We probably would have increased our giving to our congregation. I mean, we stepped up pretty big for that World Hunger Grant, but we've not increased otherwise, because if they have $5,000 in revenue coming in every month over expenses, why would we increase our giving there? I mean, it just doesn't make me a non-generous person, I don't think, because I'm giving elsewhere more than I was. But anyway, so we need to be careful with that. I know another congregation has $1 million in the bank and no idea what to do with it. Their giving has dropped by $200,000 over the last 2 years because their people know that they have nothing to do with it. And so we need to get a vision for that. So my answer to that is, at the end of the year, live into your nonprofit reality and don't fear tomorrow. Like, we have a lot of church councils and finance committees that need to read Matthew 6:25 to 34 because they do worry about tomorrow. I think at the end of this year, it would be very faithful to say that with 50% of the revenue that exceeds expenses, we're just going to do something with it and name what that is. You know, give the Synod an extra gift, give camps an extra gift, do the food pantry, or, I mean, remodel your bathroom that's needed to be remodeled for a couple of decades now. Or, I mean, do something that helps your congregation out. But don't just sit on it worrying about tomorrow, because if the congregation models too much about worrying about tomorrow, then you're going to have a setback in giving from your people as well. Now, that doesn't mean you're not financially smart. You know, it's fine to have 2 months worth of expenses on hand. It's fine to put money aside for the roof for when it needs to be replaced. It's fine to do that sort of thing. But anyway, don't just build up a bigger barn. All right. I haven't seen any questions come in, so I'm just going to keep rolling then. So what are the keys to a culture of generosity? So this comes out of my book. So this is what I spent a book on. All right. It's leadership, it's your stewardship program, and it's your strategic plan. So leadership has to be trusted. Your leaders have to be people growing in their generosity. They need to know the mission and vision of the organization, and they need to communicate that well. And by leaders, I mean staff, I mean council, and I mean other people that get to speak in front of the group. All right. Your stewardship program needs to, here's our formula. You need to inform, motivate, ask, and thank. All right. Once again, inform, motivate, ask, and thank. We Lutherans are really good at informing. We need a little bit more help with motivation and asking. If somebody is informed and asked without being motivated, they think you just wanted their money. That's where people are feel that the stewardship program is about a financial transaction. All right. And the failure to ask is causing more shame in our stewardship programs than many of us understand. What I mean by this, I was in Virginia Beach and I led a workshop, kind of similar to this one actually. And I said, if you're currently giving less than $300 a year, I encourage you next year to reach $1 a day in your giving. So for some of you, that'll be a 20% increase. For some of you, that'll be much more. But on behalf of your congregation, I'm asking you to consider a gift of $1 a day next year. And a woman approached me at the end of the session with tears in her eyes. She said, I can't tell you how important that was for me to hear. She said, I skip worship every October because I can't stand the stewardship drive because I don't think it's talking to me. I keep hearing them talk about a $300,000 budget and I don't have $300,000 to share. I don't feel like my gift matters, but I can do what you asked me to do. And I will feel better about that. She said, I also wouldn't serve on congregation council because I would have felt like a hypocrite. By not asking, by just saying, do what you can. She said things like, I'm not giving enough, which causes shame. And we don't want to be there. We need to help people to recognize that they can make a good gift. And it's what we need them to do. We are not called to equal giving, but we're called to equal sacrifice. And I think if we're all growing in generosity, then we'll be in good shape. And then we need to be strategic. We need to have a vision of where we're going and stop saying, give us some money and we'll figure out what to do. Instead, we need to tell people, we have a goal that we're going to reach 100 more people next year, and here's how we're going to do it. Wouldn't you like to give to that? And the other thing with that is when you have a strategic plan, you have goals. Instead, too often in the church, we ask people to fund tactics. By the way, like an associate pastor is a tactic. A youth director is a tactic. A building campaign is a tactic. We need a goal, and a goal is what people want to invest in. The goal is how the world is going to change and what difference it's going to make. A tactic is then how you get there. All right. And too often we're leading with the tactics and not with the goals. So then how do you model generosity? I invite people to tell generosity stories, and I'm confident you can find one around many of these. For somebody to say, I'm going to grow by $1 a day next year. Most people can afford that. Most people can afford more than that. At least those that are in many of our churches. One of my favorite stories out of the pandemic was a pastor in the month of April who was worried about his wife's job. And he said, we've never been worried about our future the way we currently are, but I need to model generosity. I'm worried about the future, but right now things are okay. So we're going to double our giving this month. We don't know what the future holds, but right now we're going to double our giving. I think that's a very faithful response. I told you a little bit about wasting $20 a week. I've had people double, triple, quadruple. I had two families in one congregation grow by 2,000% or more in a single year. It is possible. It's typically not from the person already giving $3,000 a year or $5,000 a year. I've talked to you about growing by 1% a year and never stopping. I know somebody who said, I just don't have any more annual fund money to give, but I'll include the church as part of my estate plan this year, and that's how I'll grow in generosity, which I think is a fine thing to do. So, so those are some ways we can model generosity. So I'm curious from you all, what do you think you could do? Let me see if I can. Well,
Do you want me to launch it?
yeah, I don't get the launch screen. So yes, I would like you to do that. Here we go.
Yeah, 3 more we're waiting for.
Yep, give you just another quick second to finish up here.
It's a harder question.
We'll cut it off in 5 seconds, just in case somebody's not wanting to answer. Or there could be people watching a football game now instead of paying attention to us, I guess.
There you go.
All right. Well, good. So if all of you do that and witness to that, you can lead significant generosity growth in your congregations this year. And those, I think all of these are just tremendously faithful responses as to what you might be able to do. And again, we're all in different positions. And my goal is that people just continue. Oh, you're not seeing this, sorry. There's your answers.
Oh, sorry.
I get that button, Karen. I don't know why I don't get the launch button.
I really forgot to punch it, so sorry.
So that would be significant growth in your congregations if other people joined you in these types of things. My suspicion is this is different messaging than you're typically given about what you might do. Anyway, thank you for that generosity. I hope you follow through on that. It's probably about the time to make that commitment then. All right, I've just got a couple more things, and then we'll just do questions until Karen or Michael tell us it's time to be done. So some best practices in stewardship. So the first is what I call outcome stories. Outcome stories are those stories of the ministry that demonstrate that the ministry is making a difference in people's lives. That's the story of the person whose best friend died on Good Friday, where the pastor provided pastoral care. It's the story of what difference it made that worship was available the first Sunday in the pandemic virtually when people were starting to get scared. It's the story of what it means to make it through confirmation and to hear your kids, proclaim the faith. Those are outcome stories. It's the stories of the ministry making a difference. And we need to make sure that those stories aren't just the social service stories. I am all about social service. But one of the reasons I think Bishop Eaton says we're more than just social service agencies with sacraments is that we need that story around our regular ministry, our worship, our care, our faith formation, to tell people that yes, in fact, we are making a difference in the world. So I hope, I don't think I'm putting words in her mouth on that, but I love that quote. And then there's generosity stories. Most of you have a generosity story to share that would benefit your congregation. In fact, if you all would witness to a leadership group before they make their gifts, before the rest of the congregation make their gifts to this year's stewardship drive, you will do more for leadership around the area of stewardship than you can even imagine. It's more important this year than ever because there are people that are happy to find excuses not to give. There are people that are happy to find excuses that things are going to be scarce next year. But if somebody will stand up and say, you know what, I think I waste $20 a week and I'm going to look for it. And I'm going to give that $20 to the church next year. So my commitment, by the way, folks, that's over $1,000. Okay. Which blows a lot of people's minds that $20 a week can add up to over $1,000 in a year. But if you will lead by telling, like, I like for the council to give first, not too early, but the week before the congregation gets to respond, I like for the council to give. If you would say, folks, I'm going to grow my giving by $1 a day next year, I hope you'll join me in increasing your generosity. You will lead the congregation to far more generosity than you can imagine. I think we need to work from strategic plans. We need to inform, inspire, ask, and thank. And inspiration is probably the most important of that, followed a little bit by asking. When I say to connect spirituality and giving, I mean, we need to stop making giving about a financial transaction. That this is a spiritual act. This is about getting our hearts more closely aligned with God. And it's very much a spiritual issue. And by being more generous, I believe we're telling fear, you have no place here. We're not going to worry so much about tomorrow, which is just too easy for us to do. Treat people like people. That means that we don't treat everybody the same. Treat people where they are. Allow for accountability. If you're one of those secrecy congregations, we need to stop. We need to stop that. I believe in confidentiality. I don't believe in secrecy. And I think we need to have some accountability, not from a standpoint that anybody is, caused to feel shame, but just that we can check in with somebody. Honestly, there's a lot of congregations, and several of them are in this Beginning a Culture of Generosity program, where I have the congregations track their top 10 donors for the last 3 years. And 1 year somebody might have given 5,500, and the next year they gave 4,200, and this year they're going to give 6,800. I think it's just kind of, I call it lazy giving. That 1 year we might miss a payment or two, and we just don't make it up because nobody's mentioning that we missed it. And we just need to help people to grow. And then our ministries just need to make a difference for the kingdom of God. Like, we need to be about, more than just balancing a budget and survival. We need to be about whose lives are we going to impact and what difference is that going to make. That's my list of best practices. My final slide, there are some opportunities to kind of keep this conversation going. I lead a vitality retreat. We had one scheduled for actually like 2 weeks from now, I think, at Luther Ranch. We've postponed that just because we don't think people are going to gather. There'll be one at Lutheridge, I think Valentine's weekend, and then we'll be at Luther Ranch some other time. And at the vitality retreat, we dig into strategic planning, leadership, and fundraising. And then we have a program called Stewardship for All Seasons that we will be doing in the Southeastern Synod at some point soon. We also have a program which is a year-round program that really digs deep, and we get into things like plan giving and strategic planning and leadership and communication, as well as a stewardship drive and how to build the case. Then this year we started a program called Beginning a Culture of Generosity, which is primarily getting you through your fall stewardship drive and year-end giving. 35% of giving in America happens between Thanksgiving and the end of the year, and therefore we want to make sure we pay attention to that. So that's another program we do. We're about to launch a new program that focuses, it's a 6-month program to get you through a strategic planning process. That'll be a group setting. I'm getting more information about that soon. And then there are people doing a book study on my book, Abundance. So my last question for you, if Karen can put it up, is just to see if any of you have interest in any of these or multiple of these. And if not, don't worry, all of these answers are anonymous, so I'm not going to know what you said if you don't pick any. If you're kind of sad you came today, you don't have to vote to have any further conversation on this in any way. But I would like to see where your energy is. And then if there is something that you're interested in, if you would put that in the chat before we finish so that I can follow up with you just to get you more information. So, and if there's nothing, it's fine. It's, but we just want to see where should we put energy, and who should we follow up with for the different things. So if there is anything you want, complete the survey. And then if you would put in the chat that, hey, Mike, will you contact me about the Vitality Retreat, or whatever, which, by the way, I know one of your congregations wants to be in the next time we do. So
yeah, I think this is real helpful for the Synod as well. Pastor Mike has mentioned, we've been offering the Beginning a Culture of Generosity, and we've been sponsoring 21 different congregations to go through that program.
yeah.
So if there's another program that you would like the Synod to sponsor, that means financially sponsor, by the way. We need to know that, and we do need to see where that interest and energy lies. So I'm gonna end this in just a second. Like a book study.
Wow.
Oh, and then I also had a comment that says they could only provide one answer on the survey.
Oh,
Next time.
we didn't test that part of it.
We did not test that part.
So if you would now, we're gonna finish. I think we're a small enough group. We can, if you have questions, you can unmute and chat, I think. But then if you would spend a little time in the chat box, just what you're interested in. I promise I'm not going to get salesy on all this, but if you would share what you'd like more information on, and by the way, the multiple copies of the book thing, I might be able to help you with a discount on that. So like that might actually save you other money too. And Karen, the Synod has been incredibly generous with helping get people into the Beginning a Culture of Generosity program, and so anyway.
Yeah, let us know. Pastor Mike, a couple of questions have come in. One has to do with the inadequacy of balanced budgets. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
The inadequacy of balanced budgets.
As in, you mentioned previously that when you do a balanced budget, it's actually demotivating because there's not an incentive to give. Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Sure, couple things on that. Yeah, and I might be a little out of context on a piece of that, but so I do like a balanced budget to be presented to the congregation. A flat budget is very demotivating, in my opinion. A flat budget says we have nothing else planned here, so there's nothing else to give to. There's nothing new. I like a balanced budget, but then I don't like the budget to be seen as the ceiling of what people can give to. I think the budget should be the floor. I think we should say, you know what, we need to raise $300,000 in order to do this. But you know what, if we had an extra 30,000 beyond that, wouldn't it be fun? And we promise if we get 30,000 beyond that, this is what we'll do. And then if you exceed even that generosity, this is what we would do next. That becomes far more motivating, because people don't want to just invest in the survival of the organization. They want to invest in the transformation of the kingdom. And we do that when we start to put other things in front of them. Now there are times, so there are exceptions. Like there's a congregation that I'm working with. I will be thrilled if their budget is flat next year. But they had a donor die this year who was giving away $60,000 a year. They don't have anybody replacing that. And so like if they end up flat next year, that's a celebration. But that's also something to tell people about, that like people need to know that we're going to try and do what we did this past year, but you need to know that, and that's about 10% of their giving just passed away. We've been worried about it for a couple of years and trying to change it, but people do die, move away. Sometimes they get mad, and sometimes you have to replace them. And so there's exceptions to everything, but telling people, hey, it's a tough year, we're going to cut our budget. I think tough years are the years that God might want us to at least tell people what we would do if we got more money. So I hope that answered.
Okay. Another question came in about the fact that we're going to have a very different Christmas season this year. Any thoughts on supporting end of year giving?
So, yeah, and certainly we need to focus on end of year giving. I think sometimes churches just kind of get excited that, hey, we happen to have a good end of year. I think we can put that in front of people. My first thing with end of year giving is to always say, as revenue exceeds expenses at the end of the year, this is what we're going to do. The key at the end of the year is that revenue exceeds expenses. Budgets often don't matter at that point, right? You've either overspent or you've underspent or whatever it might be. So what promise can you make that you're going to do if revenue exceeds expenses with that extra revenue? If the finance committee is simply going to hide it, then people will work very hard for you to balance your budget or balance your revenue and expenses and no more. And so I think it's to make a contract with the congregation as to what you'll do with it. That a third of it you'll put in reserves so that you don't have to worry about paying bills each month next year when you run out of money in April. But a third of it's going to go to fixing the bathroom and a third of it's going to go to the food pantry. I mean, let people know what you'll do with that extra money. The other thing is, anything you can have that's tangible. And so, and in the modeling of things. So if you want to invite people to adopt another child in their giving and gift that away, and you can do that, tangibles like the angel trees and other things like that. So, and I think what happens in times like this in our country is that people see their neighbor in need and are willing to step up for that. So if you want to adopt disaster response this year, because it seems like Mississippi keeps getting hit, maybe you do that, but I think you let people know what it is ahead of time instead of seeing how you do and then making a distribution, I think helps. The other thing, end of year, critical activity at the end of the year is to look at the people who gave to you in 2019 who haven't made a gift in 2020. And you need to do everything you can to renew their giving this year, just like a nonprofit would. And I love a good challenge gift to people that haven't given yet. It says, hey, you're one of 40 families that hasn't made a gift this year. We have a donor that'll match your gift dollar for dollar between now and the end of the year. Or you don't even have to tell them they're part of a non-donor club. But to get an incentive to get people renewed. In the fundraising world, we get really nervous when we don't renew a donor, okay? Now, from a fundraising perspective, that's a money reason. From a church perspective, it's a heart reason, right? The longer they go being a non-renewed donor, the further they're drifting away from your ministry. And so I would highly target with direct mail, with digital posting to support, and probably even phone call kinds of things in order to renew them. By the way, in nonprofit circles, you'll get an 18% higher return rate on your mail piece if you also have a social media support to it, okay? 18% is significant. Simply sending a mailing and expecting 100% reply is just out of touch with what a mailing will accomplish, even to the best of lists, okay? If you find yourself behind budget, don't simply send a letter and just assume that you've done everything you need to do to rectify the situation. You need more than that. So by aligning a direct mail piece with a social media presence, and then if you add a phone call, I don't know what percentage that drives you to, but it's even better. So we need multi-channel.
Okay. Any other questions that folks have?
I'd like to ask one, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I did what you're doing a number of years ago in our synod, and wondering how can we get pastors to move to the spirituality versus money category, and or the fear of money. I mean, it's there so big they don't want to talk about it.
I think I do find that an issue in the church. It's part of why I wrote the book I did, is to take some of the mystique off and help people recognize that it is a spiritual matter. So, I mean, I figure an author says, read my book. But I also think just
It's like whether the pastor should know the giving or not.
Well,
How do they know the spiritual welfare of the people?
I have a chapter on that in the book.
Okay.
I also, Bob, I think the other piece to that is mentoring. What I hear from pastors who don't want to know, they were mentored by somebody who said they shouldn't. And so I think there needs to be some mentoring going on. I think lay people can lead in this and tell pastor, I'm kind of offended you don't ever send me a thank you note for my gift. I did that to my pastor, by the way. Because I mean, I don't necessarily want to go all the way down that hole today. I think we need to end before too long, but I'm going to just leave it with, I think pastors need to be mentored into how to handle this differently, because they didn't necessarily get taught well in seminary on it. And I'll say that to all of my seminary professors, that this was a gap. And that's why I've been invited by 2 seminaries to talk to their students this year. I mean, because they're trying to change that to be different in the future. So
Good luck.
thank you.
I think it's a combination, though, of pastors as well as congregations who have 50, 75, 150-year traditions of not sharing financial information. And so changing that culture in a congregation can be really challenging as well, for even a pastor who believes in it.
Yeah, I have a church in South Carolina this year that actually one of the boxes on their intent card is going to be, do you give permission that the pastors will now know you're giving? And I was very skeptical about this, but I think they're over 90% of the council checking the box, and we'll see how that goes. I'm not really into democracy as much as some people are, I guess. I'm a big ask forgiveness later than permission kind of person, but that's probably part of why I'm not a parish pastor. So we'll see how that goes.
We had one other comment about ELCA having some great stewardship coaches
Sure.
that can be mentors and leaders for pastors and lay leaders at a pretty reasonable cost. So thank you, Karen, for feedback. Maybe one last question and then we'll close it off if there is one. No, well, if not, Pastor Mike, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to spend this afternoon with us to share the stories. Believe it or not, we often remember the stories as much as we remember some of the numbers and things. And also thank you for the time you spent with the Beginning a Culture of Generosity. We've had some really great feedback on that program, and we look forward to more within the Synod. So on behalf of the Synod, thank you. We really appreciate you and your time. So
Just
all of you who have attended, and please reach out to me or specifically to Patty Axel if you have some stewardship needs in your congregation that the Synod may be able to help with, or if you have interest in future programs from Pastor Mike or others. We are interested in hearing those as well. So thank you, and y'all have a great afternoon. Take care. Bye.